Welcome to Pressure Points. Our topic today is Google's judgment against them related to them paying for placement of search. And this, of course, has been the A topic in tech this week, and it's one that is going to continue to be an A topic for a long time. And most of the conversation orbits around what's the impact to Google's business and how does it impact Apple's business. But I think the pressure point is a little bit deeper than that. And specifically, I think it's related to understanding the court that made the decision and what the process is for Google to appeal this and what that road potentially ahead looks like. And so, of course, this whole case started from the Department of Justice and was handed off to be adjudicated in the D.C. District Court under Judge Mehta. And his ruling found that Google was not being compliant with antitrust, and what they were doing was an unfair advantage using what is basically $50 billion a year in TAC. It's a lot of money they spend so that your default search is with Google. And the reason why I wanted to focus on the court side of this is that the DC District Court is consider it the home field of the Department of Justice. When the Department of Justice brings a case, they're going to want to bring it to the DC District Court initially, because not only is it geographically close to them, but also philosophically they're aligned. And so, of course, that changes the dynamic. Knowing that there is that alignment, it changes the dynamic in terms of the probability that this ultimately gets overturned. And whenever there's a big case, there's always an appeal. That's, of course, happening here as well. And so the appeal process has already started. That's probably going to take 1 to 3 years. But ultimately, there's, call it, 3 more courts above the district court, ultimately ended in the Supreme Court if it needs to go that far, but that Google can continue to appeal towards. And if we look at the track record of how the DC District Court does with their cases that go up against the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court overturns the DC District Court about 62% of the time. And so that's a pretty high overturn rate if it gets to that level. And I think that ultimately that this is going to probably end in some sort of an appeal that is granted and the case gets overturned. So I think we're going to have to wait a long time. It's probably 1 to 3 years, 2 to 3 years before we hear of any judgment on the appeal. But my guess is that this is all for naught. The topic of regulation is going to continue, but I think this case specifically has a higher probability of being overturned. So that's the pressure point. I'm going to shift gears, quickly talk about Google. I actually think this would be a great thing for Google's business. It surprises me that they pay this $50 billion. It's in some ways, it's a form of insurance that they kind of keep their search top of mind. In other ways, I think it's wasted money paying this $50 billion a year in TAC. It grows at about 6% a year. They're growing their search business at about 10, 12% a year, 14% in the just most recent quarter. So you could argue paying that $50 billion a year to make sure that 14%, 14% growth business continues to do well. You could say that that's a good trade. I believe they can continue to grow search at 14% and not pay anything. I think that ultimately consumers will opt in and want to continue to use Google. I, at one point, was involved with Yandex, the Google of Russia, part of their IPO, and followed that company for a long time. They went through a similar episode where Yandex got kicked out as a default browser. They lost some share, and then they just climbed back because everybody just said they want to use Yandex. And so it ended up being a good thing for Yandex. I see a similar path. I think when shifting gears in terms of how this impacts Apple, if I'm wrong and this is not overturned, understanding what the remedy is going to has a big impact. It could be financial, it could be operational. I don't think that $20 billion is at risk directly because Apple, I think, can find other ways to make money on this. One option is that they pay for kind of like a slotting fee in a choice page, which they do in Europe. Essentially, you go and when you download a browser, it asks which search engine you want to use, and you pick that. But they could pay for that selection to be at the top of the list. Also could be some sort of a revenue share piece to it that whoever you select, Apple takes a cut of that. And then the third piece is maybe this kind of resurrects something that I incorrectly predicted many years ago, which is Apple would get into the search business. And if in fact that this is something that can be taken away from Apple, that $20 billion of basically pure profit, it's called 15% of their operating income, I could see Apple think again about trying to get more into the search business. And also related to what's going on with search and AI too, there could be an opportunity for them working with a third party to enable that as well. So it can come to market more quickly than it would have taken them maybe a decade or so ago. So focus on the pressure point. It's understanding the courts and where they align and what the appeal process looks like. One last thought. In the meantime, there is this, there's a remedy. There may be a temporary remedy as it's through appeal. There may not be. My guess is there will not be a temporary remedy because it's such a high profile case. I don't think the judge is going to want to kind of weigh in on that just yet. So on behalf of Pressure Points, I'm Gene. Bye for now.